finally, we come to the last 5 of Dr. Peter Kreeft's apologetic arguments that are meant to show that God is real. But they really only show that Christians are idiots. Who in their right mind could take any of this nonsense seriously? It isn't like it's hard to poke massive holes in these claims. Anybody can do it if they have the right kind of education or any intelligence whatsoever. So why do Christians believe? Because they care more about feelings and not at all about facts. And shysters like Kreeft play into that gullibility to make really bad arguments for God. So let's get started. So we'll start off this time with a prime example of theistic dumbfuckery, the argument from desire. Now he defines it as such. 1. Every natural innate desire in us corresponds to some real object that can satisfy that desire. 2. But there exists in us a desire which nothing in time, nothing on earth, no creature can satisfy. 3. Therefore there must exist something more than time, earth, and creatures which can satisfy this desire. 4. This something is what people call God and life with God forever. Except the premise is absurd on its face. You know, we've got these people called inventors. You can also throw in fiction writers and artists if you want to, but I'm going to stick with inventors. They desire for things that don't exist, thus they create it. They wanted things that weren't real, so they went out and made them real. That's how creativity works. He can't be this fucking dumb, can he? Besides, he says that there exists within us a desire for God. Says who? I've got no desire for his imaginary friend. In fact, if you start with absolutely no concept for his God, you'll never get there. Even with people who want a God, and the desire for gods comes from fear, not desire, but even if you start with people who want a God, but have never heard of any of the gods that infest our planet, the gods they come up with will not be like anything we already have. They just won't. They will be a completely new creation, just like all the imaginary gods we have now. Because whether he likes it or not, these gods are all just made up. There's no reason to think that any of these gods actually exist in reality. And that's something I've pointed out in the past, that none of these arguments actually get you to any specific gods. They can't. They can only get you to some vague, generic something. You can't get from that to any specific god, period. Even if you could establish that this innate desire shows that there must be some real object out there, and you can't, but even if you could, you couldn't prove that that object was the Christian God, or any other god. So these arguments don't even get you anywhere worthwhile. It's just idiotic. So let's move on. This one is so absurdly stupid, he doesn't even bother to explain it. He just says that you either get it or you don't. And nobody with a single functional brain cell gets it. He says that just because beautiful music exists, or beautiful anything for that matter, that there's some God. And that doesn't mean that there's some God. Geez, and I thought Kreeft was stupid before, but this one takes the cake. But I guess it does show just how stupid religious apologetics really are. If Bach, then God. How about if Bach, then Santa Claus? It makes just about as much sense. It really betrays the complete lack of intellect involved in any of these arguments. It's all about emotion. If you're not emotionally invested in these arguments, they sound utterly stupid. Because they are! Unfortunately, as I've said before, these lists never get any better. Every argument is just as pointless and foolish as the last. And that brings us to the argument from religious experience, which again is laughably stupid. He says it's difficult to state this argument deductively, but he tries when he says, 1. Many people of different eras and widely different cultures claim to have had an experience of the divine. 2. It is inconceivable that so many people could have been so utterly wrong about the nature and content of their own experience. 3. Therefore, there exists a divine reality in which many people of different eras and of widely different cultures have experienced. Unfortunately, while there are lots of people who claim to have had an experience with the divine, There's absolutely nobody who can objectively prove that they actually have. I mean, there's people out there who have claimed to have had experiences with Bigfoot or aliens. Does that prove that Bigfoot or aliens are actually real? Of course not. And that's the problem. People are just arbitrarily declaring that their experiences had to be with God. Can they prove that it was? Nope. All they can do is say something weird happened, and therefore, God did it. That's not an argument. That's an assertion. How can you objectively verify this assertion? Well, you can't. Which is why every time someone tells me about their experiences with God, I have to ask them how they know it was God. How do they know it wasn't the devil of some other pantheon sent to lead them away from the one true path? How do they objectively differentiate between the two? Well, they can't. They can only make the empty claim that somehow, in some way they can't explain, they just know it was their particular God. And we've got no reason whatsoever to take that seriously. So let's move along to the common consent argument. I'll just let him set this up, which he does thusly. 1. Belief in God, that being to whom reverence and worship are properly due, is common in almost all people of every era. 2. Either the vast majority of people have been wrong about this most profound element of their lives, or they have not. 3. It is most plausible to believe that they have not. 4. Therefore, it is most plausible to believe that God exists. Oh look, another false dichotomy. I'm sure we're all real surprised. In fact, this reminds me a lot of C.S. Lewis's liar, lunatic, Lord argument, where he declares that there are only a few options, then he arbitrarily dismisses the ones he doesn't like, and declares the remaining one to be true. Except he misses a lot like legend, which is the most objectively likely possibility. So here, Kreeft does the same thing as he usually does in declaring that there are only two options, throwing one of them out, and then pretending that the remaining option must be true. Of course, he has no evidence for that. All he has is his empty bullshit claim, so he waves his arms around and cooks the books so that he can pretend that the option he wanted all along has got to be it. And that's not how logic works. Whether most people have believed in some sort of God throughout history is irrelevant. I mean, people believe the earth was flat too. In fact, some still do. These people are just wrong. He's just engaged in argumentum ad populum, that because lots of people believed it, therefore it's got to be true. No, it does not. And of all the billions of people that have ever lived, and that number's about 107 billions for those who are curious, the majority have believed in some other god than his. Now, I've got no idea how accurate this is, but I've seen estimates that say that throughout history, 1,376,000,000 people have been Christian. So even if his fallacious logic was sound, that's only a tiny percentage of people who've been Christian throughout history. So why should we believe in his God again? I don't know. And finally, we come to Pascal's wager, which is a pretty pathetic place to leave the list. But since every single one of his claims have been terminally flawed, why the hell not? Pascal's wager isn't even an argument for the existence of God. It's a fallacious argument from consequences. You don't lose anything by believing, and you potentially lose a lot by not believing, so you might as well believe. Except it's not that simple. Pascal's wager engages in the theist's favorite fallacy, the false dichotomy once again. There are only two options, either their God or no gods. But we all know that's stupid, so let's try that one again. How many gods are there in theory? Well, nobody really knows. I mean, the Hindus have 33 gods on their own, the ancient Hittites had over 1,000, so that's going to throw a wrench into things. Currently, there's about 4,200 religions on the planet, and extrapolating that into history, that gives us about 63,000 different religions, assuming that the number has remained relatively constant. Ancient religions had more gods than modern religions, and modern religions, which tend to be monotheistic, are relatively few in number. So, just for shits and giggles, if we average out Hinduism, the Hittites, and modern religions, we get about 367 gods per religion, or 23,121,000 gods overall. So let's just round that down to 23 million. So that means that Christians have a 1 in 23 million chance that their God is the one true God, assuming there's one true God at all. I mean, for all we know, all 23 million gods could be real. Or half of them, or none of them. There's simply no evidence that any gods of any kind exist in reality. Regardless, this takes their nice, safe wager and flushes it down the proverbial toilet. Because now, it's not safe to believe in their God, or any God, based on the odds. And of course, that doesn't take into account all the possible gods, the ones man has never gotten around to making up, so the odds are now just astronomical. Even if we assume that the number of conceivable gods is 1% of the ones we've ever had believers in, we're now talking about 1.25 trillion odds of getting the right one, if there even is a right one. So please, tell us how you have nothing to lose in picking one of them at random. Go ahead. But it gets worse, because belief is not subject to the will. You can't just pick a God to believe in because you cannot choose your belief. You have to be convinced of it. So at best, you'd have to pretend to believe in a God, and seriously, do you think your God's really that stupid? Wouldn't they know that you're only playing the odds? Is any God who doesn't know that worth bowing down to in the first place? I certainly wouldn't think so. So you can't just pretend to believe in 23 million gods in the hope that you just might get lucky. Who the hell's got time for that? It just makes Pascal's wager so ridiculous. It makes me wonder who could be so stupid to buy into it. Oh yeah, Dr. Peter Kreeft. And this is really why religious apologetics are so fucking stupid. I mean, this is the best they can do. These are the best arguments they can come up with. Every single solid one of them falls apart under the most cursory of evaluation. They're so chock full of fallacies and unsupported claims that are designed to appeal to the believer who just won't think too hard, or at all, about any of it. Because if you look at it, you have to burst out laughing. I mean, seriously, what the hell is wrong with these people? Oh yeah. They're not thinking about what they believe. They don't care if it's really true, so long as it gives them an emotional high. They're going to embrace it because feeling good is all they want. Facts? Fuck facts. Give me feels. If this doesn't prove to people that theists are emotionally hyperactive children, I don't know what will. And we have the apologists to thank for showing us, because they present these ludicrous arguments as if anyone should take them seriously. Unfortunately, far too many do, which makes me weep for humanity. And maybe it should make you weep too.